Hello everyone, this is Dr. K. Jagannayaki, Associate Professor in MBA Department, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Dundigal. Today I want to discuss about sampling and measurement errors. So in research study, most of the cases we used to find different types of errors that may occur during the study. So how these errors occur? So this leads to, there are two types of errors. One is sampling error, another one is measurement error. So a faulty sample also leads to errors in the research study, and the scale, whatever you're going to apply in order to measure the characteristics, attitudes, that may also lead to some sort of errors. So I want to discuss in detail about what do you mean by sample errors and how these errors occurs in the study, and about the measurement errors also. So first of all, I would like to discuss about errors in sampling. So at the time of selecting the samples, some errors or some sort of bias that may occur, and these errors, they are divided into two types. One is sampling error, another one is non-sampling error. So sampling error is that they have their origin in sampling. It means due to a wrong selection of a sample that leads to errors in sampling itself. So that is known as sampling errors have their origin in sampling, and these errors also arise due to the fact that only a part of the population is enumerated. So coming to the sample survey, it is not possible if you have a large mass of data that may not be possible to cover by the researcher. So in that case, what he used to do, he used to select a small part which is the representative of the population, whatever you have chosen for the study. So as it is the part of the total enumeration or population, it will possess the same characteristics of the same population. So these errors, they do not occur in complete population survey. So whatever errors that may cause in the sample, that may not be belongs to the total population. So sampling errors, they can be done due to the following reasons. The first reason is defective sample design. So in case of defective sample design, first of all, what do you mean by defective sample design? So in order to select the samples, we need to adapt some procedures, some techniques we have to consider in the selection of a sample. So basically, we used to divide these sampling techniques into two types. One is random sampling technique, another one is non-random sampling technique. So in case of random sampling technique, so just like that, without having any proper criteria, we used to choose some of the objects from the complete enumeration. So that is known as random sampling, and non-random sampling means where we used to follow some systematic procedure in the selection of a sample. So instead of using one type of technique, if you are going to use other type of technique in the selection of a sample, again that leads to defective sample design. So we can have faulty selection of sampling technique. So that leads to sampling error, and sometimes we may also have some sort of bias. So because in some of the cases, the researcher, he used to depends on his own decision. So purposive sampling, sometimes he may choose, or sometimes he will consider judgment sampling. So that also leads to defective sample design. And it is necessary to consult an expert. Why? Because to avoid some sort of these type of sampling errors, it is always essential to approach an expert or a people who will have expertise knowledge in that area, and basing on their suggestions or guidance, we can able to select a proper sample design so that we can reduce defective samples in research study. That's how one can minimize the sampling errors. Then second one is substitution of units. This is another reason that creates sampling errors in the study. So substitution of units means sometimes we used to substitute instead of one sample techniques, we used to go with other type of samples. So why it happens means it depends upon the convenience of the investigator. Basing on his own convenience, he used to select sample. So whenever they used to select that type of samples, it leads to some sort of difficulties. So that also leads to sampling errors. So the characteristics of whatever possess by one sample which is you are going to substitute with the other, it may not have the same characteristics whatever we have originally selected. So that difference between these two samples also leads to sampling error. Then next type of reason is faulty demarcation of sampling units. So this type of sampling errors we used to find in case of agricultural experiments, where we used to go with some sort of crop cutting surveys, etc. So this type of demarcation sampling units, demarcation means like division, and you are going to segregate, bifurcate like that. So that sampling units at the discretion of the investigator. So basing on the investigator's choice only, he can able to select the samples from different populations. So in such type of surveys, while dealing with the borderline should be taken to minimize the investigator's bias. So it doesn't mean that I am taking my own way of selection of the samples and all. So we should always get some sort of help from the others so that we can reduce or minimize the sample error in case of faulty demarcation of sample units. The next one is improper choice of estimates. So improper choice of estimates means here whatever population you are going to consider for the study, it should be relevant. So we need to find out, describe the characteristics of the population. It should be in a well-defined manner, and we need to check whether it suits the given study or not. All these things we used to consider and exact the statistical estimates in consultation with experts. That should be leads to appropriate result whenever you are going to draw some sort of statistical inferences related to the selected population. Then sampling errors decrease with the increase in the sample size. So how can we minimize the sampling errors means just by increasing the sample size up to a certain extent we can minimize or reduce the sampling errors. So it can be proved statistically that sampling error is inversely proportional to the square root of sample size. So these two have an inverse relationship between the sampling errors to that of the size of the sample. Then second type of error is non-sampling error. So non-sampling errors, these errors occurs because we infer about the population on the basis of a sample. So but it is not always correct. Just basing on the sample, if you are going to conclude the characteristics of a particular sample, and that we are going to make it as a generalized statement or overall conclusion. So there are errors which can arise in collecting, processing and analyzing the data irrespective of whether a sample survey is conducted or a complete census is done. So whatever may be the type of study, whether it is a census study or a sample survey, it doesn't make any difference, but this type of errors they may occur due to the collection of data, and even in the case of at the time of processing the data, and sometimes even while you are going to analyze the data by using appropriate statistical tools and all. So these errors known as non-sampling errors, thus they present both in sample surveys and census enumerations. So here this type of errors is not alone restricted to samples, but they also arise in case of total population also. So these errors can occur at any stage of planning or execution of a sample or a census survey. So as at the beginning we said, this type of errors may occur in the data collection, data processing and data analysis. So whatever may be the stage of the planning and execution, everywhere whether it is related to a sample survey or a complete enumeration, in all the cases there may be chances of getting non-sampling errors. So major sources of these non-sampling errors are like faulty definitions of objectives, response bias, sometimes non-response bias, and the errors due to interviewers, and the errors in measurement and publications. So all these things they also leads to non-sampling errors in research study. So first one, if you uh, discuss about the faulty definitions of objectives. So in the beginning of any survey, first of all, we need to formulate the objectives. So these objectives they should be clearly stated. So if you know the purpose, what is the purpose of doing the study, then only we can able to collect the samples. Whether you have to go with a sample survey or you want to go with a population or census survey. So it that is depends upon the objectives whatever you are going to formulate in your research study. And second one is like if specifications about the data to be collected. So once you have formulated the objectives, then basing on that we can able to decide what type of data sources we need to have in our study. Whether you want to do with primary data sources or secondary data sources, that we can identify only with the help of the objectives. And whether the data is adequate or inadequate, whether the data, whatever data collected by using various data collection sources, whether it is consistent or not, whether the data is relevant or irrelevant, whether you can able to establish reliability or not. So all these things they directly connected with the objectives whatever we have formulated in our study. That is the reason they should be defined in very clear cut terms. And second one is response bias. So response bias means like supply of improper or incorrect information by the respondent. So even though you are going to conduct a survey by preparing a questionnaire, again these questionnaires may be of different types, structured and unstructured. So whatever type of information you need to have, that we need to formulate in the form of a questionnaire. And that survey we can carry out with various methods. So, at the time of conducting these surveys, sometimes the respondent they hesitate to provide information. So this may happen due to many reasons. The first one is like misunderstanding of a question. If the respondent unable to understand what exactly the question is meant for, then in that case also he will provide incorrect information. Is not going to provide relevant data. Then prestige or status, sometimes they keep mum. Why? Because prestige is another problem to the respondent. If I speak something, how it leads to, in which way it will go. So all these things he used to think before going to give any sort of communication to the researcher. And third one is his self-interest. So if you want to provide correct information, you should have interest. So it not every time you can find that everyone they have to give the true information, the facts only they used to discuss and all. It depends on self-interest. If you are interested, then you are going to provide accurate information to the investigator, or else we'll say whatever way you want to give any sort of you try to mislead the researcher also. So that type way people they used to cause response bias. The next one is failure of his memory. So sometimes due to absence mind or due to some over stress or some other reasons, he may not recollect the things properly. So that also leads to response bias and beliefs and prejudice of the respondents. So it depends on the respondent how he used to react in a particular situation, and it depends purely on his interest and willingness to provide accurate and correct information to the researcher. So if the researcher can able to establish a good cordial relations with the respondent, then he can acquire correct information from the respondents. That's how he used to reduce the response bias. The next one is non-response bias is another cause for non-sampling errors. So in this case, it occurs a full information is not collected on all units in the sample. So sometimes even due to the time factor or some other reasons, the enumerator also he fails to collect complete information from all the units in the sample that has chosen by the researcher. So if a respondent is not traceable or does not respond, and even after many reminders, then what he will do? In that case, he will fill the gaps whatever that arises in the research study, and he tried to fulfill all the information. He will furnish everything on his own. But it leads to some non-response bias because the other person he may not be available and maybe not able to respond due to work stress or some other reasons. So anyhow, these people they will have some sort of targets. They have to complete the task. So out of that, sometimes they will exclude some of the unfilled data. So non-response, whatever they used to seek from the some of the respondents in the sample. So the some portion of sampling units is excluded from the sample. Again, that leads to non-response bias. The next one is errors due to interviewers. So as we know, research is a scientific investigation. People should have well-trained and highly experienced persons, and they should know how to carry out a survey, but how to pose questions and how to extract the accurate information from the respondents. But an ill-trained interviewer, they may ask a question in such a way that the response of the respondent, it may be affected. They will hurt the way the researcher or interviewer they used to ask questions. So out of that, sometimes maybe lack of focus on the interview, and the interviewer may not record the answers incorrectly, record the proper answers, and instead of record the accurate result or correct answers, they may record fault answers also. So sometimes the beliefs and prejudice of the interviewer also influence the results of the survey. So this type of things, whatever the errors that occurs due to interviewers, that comes under non-sampling error. It is not related to the sample or to the complete enumeration. The next one is errors in measurement and publication. So these observations, whatever they used to make in an experiment, may be erroneous if the measuring tool is defective. So you have collected the accurate information by using appropriate data collection techniques. Everything is fine, but the measuring tool, whatever you are going to use, if it is proved a defective one, then your entire study, your entire research, it will prove wrong. So a careless recording on the part of the investigator, that also causes the errors in measurement and publication. So in the processing of data errors, it may incur during compilation, editing and coding. So at these stages also sometimes this type of measurement errors we can find in research study. Printing and publication errors, that also leads to errors in measurement. So sampling errors increase with an increase in the number of units in a survey. So non-sampling errors, it occurs mainly as you are going to increase the number of units in the survey. But whereas coming to sampling errors, if you increase the sample size, we can decrease or minimize or reduce the sampling errors. Whereas in case of non-sampling errors, with the increase of the number of units, even the sampling errors also increase. Then next type of errors we can find in case of measurement. So measurement means it is the procedure of assigning numerals or scores to properties or attributes. See, if they are parameters or variables, we can measure some of the variables like height, weight, speed, velocity, these can be quantifiable. But whereas coming to the characteristics or attributes which cannot be measured in terms of quantity, and for these things we need to use some sort of measurement of scales. So we used to assign some numerals or scores to those attributes or characteristics. So the difference in scores that have been measured and the true scores. So whatever we get, the true score is different. That should be compared with the scores that we have assigned to various attributes. So these errors occurs due to imperfection in measuring procedure. So if you are going to select a wrong measurement of scale, again that leads to errors in measurement. So the measurement errors can occur due to faults at various stages of the research study. So we can find these measurement errors at the time of construction of hypothesis. Even in case of making questionnaires, that time also we may see these errors in measurement, and choosing a research or sample design in the data collection, data coding and analysis. So at these stages, one can have these measurement errors in any one of the stage. So these errors basically classified into two types. One is random errors, another one is systematic errors. So random errors means, so these errors, they cause all of a sudden, they occur all of a sudden due to some assignable causes. So they are beyond the control of the decision maker. For example, all of a sudden if some fire accident occurs in the organization, or due to some earthquake and floods, all these things. See, these are all comes under random fluctuations. All of a sudden, if something happens due to the changes in some of the things which are beyond the control of the decision maker, so that type of errors are known as random errors, and these are all uncontrollable. They do not have a pattern and they can occur in any measurement. So we cannot predict because it is full of uncertainty. So no one can predict what is going to happen in the future. So out of these things, we may have random errors. They occur due to honest mistakes and inaccuracies. So we have one thing. So the person who will work, they will always commit mistakes. So when you are going to make some mistakes, then that leads to random error, because knowingly or intentionally you are not going to do anything. So out of that hurry or some other reasons, it creates some sort of discrepancy in the work, so and that leads to an error. And due to inaccuracies, instead of providing accurate data, sometimes people may provide faulty information. That also leads to random errors. In some cases, the true value or score of a property is in positive random or in negative random error. So it depends upon the true value or score of the property, whatever attribute you are going to study. So there is a difference between the assigned score and the true score. So just by taking these difference into consideration, we may have two types of errors. One is positive random error, another one is negative random error. Then next one is systematic error. So as the name itself, it represents that these errors causes due to system-wide factors. So here they have a pattern in their occurrence. Whereas coming to non-random errors, they do not have any specific pattern. At any point of time, they may occur in any type of measurement. But whereas coming to systematic errors, they have a definite pattern in their occurrence and constant in all the measurement. Whatever measurement you are going to take, whether it is nominal scale, ordinal, interval or ratio scale, everywhere we can find the same type of systematic error. So this occur due to assignable causes. And by critical examination of the measurement procedure, we can correct and these errors also, they never eliminate or remove completely. We can reduce the error, but it cannot be eliminated completely or permanently. So some of the sources of measurement are as follows. The first one is respondent. So respondent is the main person who creates the systematic errors in the research. How means by providing false information. So why generally the respondent will provide faulty information, inaccurate information means due to the factors like ignorance, sometimes he may not remember the things what happened. So out of that ignorance, another thing he will have the fear of status and prestige. Out of that also he never open his mouth to provide correct information or not by understanding the question correctly. So either any one of the three reasons out of that that leads to systematic error from the respondent point of view. So a respondent due to temporary factors like tiredness, boredom or anxiety that can also give inaccurate answers. So sometimes if you're very busy, you're fully occupied with your works, and all of a sudden if people will come and they ask you to produce some sort of information, so maybe due to stress or tiredness you never show interest to provide accurate information. So again that leads to systematic error. And second error that arises due to interviewer. See, an interviewer should be a trained person because he should know how to extract accurate information from the respondents. So he will have that skill, the art of asking questions. So untrained interviewer may affect the response of the respondent by his behavior of style of asking questions. See, if you observe some two or three members when they used to ask some sort of questions, their behavior or the attitude, whatever they used to show towards other persons, that also matters a lot. If a person who will ask very gently and politely, immediately the other person also he will respond in the same manner. If you are asking in a rude manner and you are ordering something commanding and all, you will get that type of answers accordingly. So your behavior and the style of asking questions is very very important at the time of data collection from the respondents. Either it may be a small sample or may be a complete enumeration. It depends upon the ability of the interviewer, how well trained he is, and what type of behavior he used to have, and that also matters, and that leads to systematic error. And sometimes an interviewer, also known as measurer, so he may misunderstand the answers. See, maybe the respondent provided the correct information, but the interviewer being as the measurer, if he unable to analyze the answers properly, then again that leads to systematic error. So commit an error at the time of coding or tabulating the responses. So that is the reason due to not having proper answers and due to lack of analyzing skills, sometimes the interviewer may also commit errors at the time of coding the data whatever collected by him, and whenever he is going to present those data in a tabulated manner, that time also he may create some sort of systematic errors. Then third source is non-response. See, non-response from people is another major problem. People, they don't take interest or don't bother to take time to filling the questionnaire. So, out of lack of interest, sometimes they never show interest to fill the questionnaire. Whether you are going to mail this type of things, we may see in case of mailing surveys. So generally we used to get some mails regarding surveys, but only few of the people they will respond positively and they will take time to fill the questionnaire. So one third of the mail questionnaires are never received back. So you will send but you never get them back filled by the respondents. So to fill this gap, sometimes a researcher may fill these questionnaires himself or get them filled by his group of friends. So this is another major cause of error in the results of the study. So when I am going to fill my questionnaire, I'll fill those questions as per my choice. What type of answers I need to have, accordingly I will fill. So again that leads to systematic error. So a good researcher therefore always starts with a higher number of questionnaires as sample size. So that is the reason in a questionnaire we should have more number of questionnaires so that we can have an accurate data without any lagging or without any type of errors. Then next source is faulty instrument. So in a quantitative survey, a constant error is sometimes found due to faulty instrument. So instruments also, it matters a lot. Instrument in the sense what type of method or technique you are going to use to analyze the data. So how it supports your study or your survey so that you can come out with accurate results. You are able to find optimum solution to the existing problem. So a faulty questionnaire in a qualitative or social survey. So this may find in case of social surveys. Social survey means like it is the studies which are related to the behavior of the people. So for example, if you are going to measure the customer satisfaction, then in that case, we use generally people they may use different types of words like difficult words, sometimes lack of enough response choice. You're asking a question, but there is no scope to fill that space, whatever you have provided to the respondent, and inadequate space for writing answers, illegible and incorrect printing, etc. So all these things comes under faulty instrument. And again, these faulty instruments also one of the reason for systematic error. The next, choice of sample design. So measurement errors can also occur due to a poor choice of sampling technique. For example, you have to use stratified sampling, let us take. So instead of that, if the researcher has taken simple random sampling or a cluster sampling or area sampling, again it leads to difference in terms of measurements. So for every sample design, the measurement may also differ from one type of sample design to another type of sample design. So a poor choice of sample design is also leads to faulty measurement instrument in research studies. So these are all known as measurement of scales, and in case of these errors, some may be due to wrong choice of the sample design and some due to wrong choice of the scales whatever you are going to use to measure the attributes or characteristics of a particular study. So these things one can understand thoroughly and they can able to identify what is the appropriate tool and what is the correct method in the selection of a particular sample, whether it is related to a sample survey or a population survey, whatever it may be. So one should have this knowledge of sample techniques as well as measurement of scales so that we can minimize this type of errors in the research study. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.